The year is 2004. It's been 3 years since the release of the Game Boy Advance, and Usher is absolutely killing it, winning award after award for his album Confessions, which ended up selling enough copies to go platinum in the UK. Now, Usher won't be the only one releasing something that would end up selling a lot of units this year. See, Nintendo has been working on this thing called the
developer system,
which will be released to the masses near the end of the year. Now, how will it improve compared to the Game Boy Advance? Some obvious improvements would be some more buttons, higher resolution display, maybe even a bigger screen altogether, and online play through Wi-Fi. Fast forward a bit and the DS is revealed. It has more buttons, works with Wi-Fi
via the net,
and the resolution and screen size also increased a bit. Actually, it sort of doubled? Yeah, this thing has 2 screens. One with a touchscreen and one without. This not only sets it apart from the GBA, but also every other console made ever. Even though the DS is supposed to be the
developer system,
it kind of gives
developers
a design challenge from the get-go. Now that there's 2 screens, you need to figure out how to distribute the game between them. Where do you put the focus? Can a gamer pay attention to both of the screens at the same time? If not, what do you put in the screens to account for this? Let's do a thought experiment, alright? I want you to imagine a DS. You've just put a cartridge into it, and the first game that comes to mind starts loading. Could be a game you love, could be a game you hate, doesn't matter. Now, imagine playing it for a little bit. BAM! I just destroyed one of your screens! On any other console, this would now make it impossible for you to keep playing. On DS though, there's a good chance you won't be affected much. I sent a survey consisting of 2 questions to some of my friends to see if I'm not, bending the truth to my will for the sake of this video. Like with my thought experiment from earlier, I asked them to name the first DS game that came to mind and then had them consider whether or not it'd be playable if one of the screens happens to cease functioning. The majority of people would say their game became unplayable, but there's also a considerable amount of people who believe their game will remain playable. Aren't statistics great? Really helps getting a point across sometimes. Okay, so what we know now is that some games do and some games don't work with 1 screen less. Another way to say this is that some games do and some games don't rely on the dual screens. And I know what you're thinking. Wanyay, you're going on another tangent again to lengthen your video for that 1 channel point reward you have. And just so you know, that is only partially true. Okay, so to answer why Layton is a perfect DS game, I feel like it's important to establish what a true DS game is. I know how fucking stupid that sounds, but please bear with me here. To me, a true DS game has to take advantage of the fact that it's on the DS, because if it doesn't, then it might as well have been made for another platform. Just for the record, this is not a bad thing. There are some great games on the DS that don't necessarily take advantage of any of its unique features. Take New Super Mario Bros. DS, for example. A hugely successful DS game in both sales and ratings that would work just as well on any other Nintendo console that had a new Super Mario Bros. Game released on it. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that there are good games that happen to be on the DS and good DS games.
Bisexual Morpheus.
Now, to circle back to the dual screen bit, let's go over the first of a few ways you can recognize whether or not a game is a true DS game. If the game relies on the dual screen, it's a true DS game. Most people would probably even say it's where the DS got its name from. If a DS game stays largely playable with just one of the screens intact, I don't think it would classify as a true DS game. Now, not all games that rely on the dual screens actually do something interesting with both of the screens. There's quite a few games where one of the screens is reserved for some kind of a basic menu, an inventory, or a map. To eliminate these games, we can put them through the streamer test. See, streamers tend to mess with the size of the DS screens on their layout, usually making one screen smaller than the other. If this is the case, and one of the screens is significantly smaller, then I would probably cross it off the list as well.
Man, I'm dead. Pretty silent here. Pretty silent.
Pretty silent.
Hello, everybody. My name is Creepy Silent.
Here's a short one. Does the game need to be played in book mode by flipping it 90 degrees? Instantly qualified? I will not be elaborating any further. Whoever came up with this is a genius. I would also check whether the game was released on another system or ported and see how it scales against the DS version. If the game turns out to be better or pretty much the same, then that begs the question, is this a true DS game? You should play Ghost Trick, by the way, just a suggestion, nothing more to it. As research for this video, I played a bunch of different DS games, and what I found is that among the games I played that rely on dual screens, a slight majority used the touchscreen and stylus as the primary way to control the game. I was considering using this control scheme as one of the criteria for a true DS game since it's unique to the system, but then somebody showed me the absolute bonkers way you play Mario Slam basketball and made me rethink this criteria. Now it will be any game that implements touchscreen and stylus in a meaningful way. Now that we're on the same page about what a true DS game is, we can define what a perfect DS game is.
Edmund McMillan. You little...
First and foremost, it has to be a true DS game. Now, this might come as a surprise, but I think the game has to also be good. This means good gameplay, visual style, story, sound design, music. Since the DS is a compact handheld, it might also be worth considering whether the game can be played in short bursts as opposed to long stretches. And lastly, there's the vibe check. Is the game a good sum of its parts, and does it evoke that special feeling when playing it?
So like, when are you getting to the Layton part?
Level 5, the studio that developed all the Layton games, was founded by Akihiro Hino. Initially, they worked on games for Sony, but after gaining greater recognition through their work on an MMORPG called True Fantasy Life Online, which got cancelled late in production, a RPG about space pirates called Rogue Galaxy, and the 8th game in the Dragon Quest franchise, Level 5 was going to publish an original video game for the Nintendo DS. While doing market research on what was successful at the time, Hino found Brain Age.
What's interesting about Brain Age is that it wasn't just successful with gamers, but also with people that had shown no interest in playing video games prior. Some of them even bought a DS for the sole purpose of playing Brain Age and nothing else.
Hino saw great potential in a game that would target this demographic specifically. Level 5 would be making a game that bridges the gap between Brain Age and more traditional video games. Like Brain Age, it will be some kind of puzzle game, so they approached a veteran when it comes to puzzle making to help with its development. Akira Tago, an actual professor that makes puzzles, known for making a series of puzzle novels called Atama No Taisou, which translates to head exercises or brain teasers if you're willing to believe Google Translate, was approached by Level 5 to initially create a video game version of his books. Akira Tago was very much on board. His job would be providing both new and old puzzles to the game, and Level 5 would mostly work on developing the gameplay side of the project. But then, disaster struck. Somebody had acquired the rights for the Atama No Taisou franchise via the internet, making it so that it was no longer in Tago's hands. This meant that, unless this was resolved, Level 5 could no longer publish a game under this name. Instead of halting their work though, Level 5 continued work on the game using what were supposed to be placeholder characters, Professor Herschel Layton and his apprentice Luke Triton. When Akira Tago found out about the duo, he liked them so much they ended up sticking with them as the main protagonist, which, if you ask me, was probably for the best. See, I actually went out of my way and looked into the Atama No Taisou books and found a few of the series book covers. Some of the covers of the Atama No Taisou books would probably work as games. You can even see two recurring characters that could have a similar dynamic as Luke and the Professor. But then there's other covers which straight up look like Boomer Comics? Now, this doesn't mean no Atama No Taisou games were ever released. Level 5 released a total of 4 games in collaboration with Akira Tago a few years after the release of Layton. And they don't feature the recurring characters from before, or at least they're not on any of the box art. Man, some part of me really wants to look into the books and the games a bit more, but there's a couple reasons why finding more information was kind of difficult. First of all, there's the Miku diff, or the borderline unwinnable search results battle between one thing and a Miku product that shares the same name. I guess me and Akira Tago share at least one thing in common, because I have also been ratioed by Miku. Atama No Taisou is a song in
Hatsune
which Miku
Miku
suggests solving brain teasers to distract from the pain of a broken heart. Here's a short excerpt. To give you a good idea of how popular the song is, it has close to 10 million plays on Osu. I honestly would not be surprised if it has surpassed 10 million if you tab out now and check the play count. So yeah, tough competition for the professor. Then there's the language barrier. Both the games and the books have, as far as I'm aware, not been translated, meaning that even if I did manage to get my hands on any of the books' content, I would not be able to make any sense of it. I did manage to play one of the Atama No Taisou DS games, and you probably already know where this is going. It appears that pressing random buttons and hoping for the best doesn't get you far in a puzzle game. Honestly, even just searching the web for Japanese websites that could provide more information was difficult, since I couldn't differentiate which sites, if they even exist, actually cover Akira Tago's works or are just covering brain teasers by a completely different person. I would say that the Atama No Taisou series is just not that popular, which would actually solidify my argument from earlier about the switch to Professor Layton being a good thing, but I don't know, man, it still feels like I'm somehow missing out on some gold mine of information that could either make or break this statement. In case you're wondering where I got the info on development from, well, it's from a book that covers the development and some other Layton related stuff. This is not the book. Obtaining it would have probably cost me one of my vital organs, so yeah, this is Wuthering Heights. If you want to read the book yourself, you can, through one of the links in the description. It's 2007 now. We're still a bit sad about Sweet Life of Zack and Cody ending after 3 seasons, and Professor Layton is about to make its debut. Alright, quiet down everybody. Let's see how it goes. Professor Layton and the Curious Village was a huge success. It got great reviews, sold over 3 million copies worldwide, and ended up winning a bunch of awards. Kinda like Usher did. Which is obviously deserved because, say it with me,
Layton is a perfect DS game.
Exactly.
Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe.
Okay, now we can finally get to the point of this video, Professor Layton and how it's a perfect DS game. The Professor Layton games are, when observed from a distance, pretty straightforward point-and-click adventure and puzzle games. What makes it so special is the way they take the gameplay loop of walking around, talking to people and solving puzzles, and surround it with this sort of palpable, mysterious, yet intriguing energy. This is gonna sound kind of silly, but the settings created in the Layton games always felt really real to me. When trying to put into words why the game does this to me, I guess, I found that for starters, this game is really fucking good audio-visually. I like how pretty much every track within all the different Layton OSTs shares the same kind of instrumentation and overall tone, making it very recognizable among other video game OSTs. This makes it so that the moment a Layton track starts playing, you are in the Layton world. Speaking of the world, the Layton games take place in this sort of romanticized version of England, which feels very real thanks to its eerie but also warm and nostalgic look. On top of that, the people that live in these locations that you come to visit feel like actual living and breathing people. One of my personal favorite examples of this being the fact that they'll just walk around. They talk to people, they're in different spots depending on the day, they won't always give you the same puzzle when you encounter them, and sometimes you'll even miss out when you haven't spoken to them during a certain part of the story. On top of that, sometimes they just won't be there during, for example, the evening. This part is really f***ing cool. From when I first played a Layton game over 10 years ago on the DS that me and my classmates were allowed to use during our free time in class, until a couple of months ago when I last played a Layton game, I've always felt really immersed when playing Layton games. I guess our teacher considered the Layton games educational games? Now, let's take a look at a game that didn't achieve the same feeling for me. Heavy Rain. What are you doing? Stop, please. Hey, stop changing the script. We're in the middle of a video, man. You can't just do... You are typing with 2 fingers. Aren't you a professional writer? Oh, my lord. Well, let's take a look at a piece of digital entertainment that didn't achieve the same feeling for me, I guess. Heavy Rain. Heavy Rain describes itself as a gripping psychological thriller filled with innumerable twists and turns. Gripping. Twists. I mean, I guess there's a part in the game where a character grips and twists something, but outside of that? In Heavy Rain, you play as 4 different protagonists, all trying to solve the mystery of the origami killer. During the game, you make decisions as them, and these decisions will decide what ending you get. Now, I'll give an amount of credit where an amount of credit is due. Your choices will actually lead to different endings. But whilst playing, these choices always felt really weird to me. Instead of having a few options that would allow me to act the way I would if I were thrown into the situations the game offers, it felt like I was a kindergarten teacher trying to keep the kids in my class from getting themselves killed. Instead of being engrossed in the story's mystery like I was with Layton, I am constantly dumbfounded by what the characters apparently think are normal ways to react in certain situations and what they get up to in the time I'm playing as one of the other 3. I've heard people argue that Layton has no replay value. Now, I think this is a strange critique to have about a puzzle game, but I'd rather have a game with no replay value at all than a game where the different outcomes are mostly determined by one of the characters dying in some Florida Man-esque way because I missed a QuickTime event. Heavy Rain has about the same gameplay loop as Professor Layton has. It basically consists of walking around, talking to people, and QuickTime events. Where Layton breaks up its story-focused sections with puzzles, Heavy Rain does this with scenes where you are met with a high amount of QuickTime events. People tend to joke about the way Layton presents its puzzles sometimes. You know, the sections where it's kind of like, excuse me, there happens to be a feline on the loose, and we've been trying to find it. Have you seen it?
A cat, you say? As a matter of fact, I did see one
3
passing
cats.
by a minute ago. There's one little problem, though.
It's different to I guess for some this might break the immersion a bit, but I don't know, failing to help the baby get to sleep QTE sections multiple times, or just the general awkwardness of these sections feels so much worse to me. Like for Layton, it sort of makes sense too. He's like the puzzle guy, known for puzzles. Whereas in Heavy Rain, the characters don't have some kind of latent psychic ability that allows them to know what they're supposed to do in certain situations and whether they're succeeding or not. Oh, and just to clarify this, I did actually enjoy playing Heavy Rain, but for wildly different reasons than Layton. If it wasn't clear already, I think Layton is a good game. The whole package of experience, which means 2 of the conditions for a perfect DS game have already been met. You probably thought I forgot about this, huh? Not gonna happen, buddy. I wrote a big-ass script. Everything was meticulously planned from the beginning. Now, the script also tells me I should call you, a big idiot. But I feel like that's going a bit too far. Actually, that part wasn't in the script. Look. I even wrote down that I would show you my script. Very meta. The last Layton game I played was Professor Layton and the Curious Village, but instead of playing the DS version, I played the HD mobile port. This allows me to check for another condition. More specifically, how the original DS version fares against the port. Outside of the higher quality textures and a few other small additions, the game is basically the same as the original. The logical conclusion here is that the DS version still holds up, but if you want to play a Layton game without any hassle, you should probably play the mobile port. Okay, up next, the streamer test. For this, I used Twitch's Explore feature and used the thumbnails that show up to determine whether or not Layton games pass this test. When looking, I found that the majority keeps both of the screens at the same size, which makes sense considering that you are mostly solving puzzles where one screen has the explanation and the other has the visual part, and exploring where one screen has the map and the other has the street view. I did, in all fairness, opt for making one of the screens larger than the other. But that is mostly out of laziness. If I would play another Layton game at this point, I would probably make a toggle which would allow me to focus on either of the screens. Now lastly, I'd like to give the game credit for being a good portable game. The cool part about the DS and most other handhelds is that you can basically play wherever and whenever you want. Layton plays into this by allowing you to save whenever you want, and once you reload your game, it'll give you a short summary of what you've been up to. Now, I don't know about you, but I think Layton passed the perfect DS game test with flying colors. I mean, are you surprised? Layton is one of the most beloved DS games ever. Now what I'm curious about is what the upcoming game will be like, since it's gonna be the first Layton game that is in no way connected to the DS. See, the last Layton game that got released, Layton's Mystery Journey, did still get a 3DS release. Okay, I know about Professor Layton Royale and Layton Brothers Mystery Room. Can we just pretend those don't exist? The game is set to release in 2025, so there is only one piece of footage showcasing its gameplay so far. But within it, we can already find something interesting. If you're actively trying to avoid anything involving the new game, here's a timestamp so you can skip the upcoming section. In this trailer, we can see the line between the traversal gameplay and the puzzle-solving gameplay being blurred a bit. Now, this might only be because it's centered around what appears to be a very story-relevant building, but this could potentially also be the way Professor Layton evolves from its original DS gameplay formula. Obviously, this is only speculation, but seeing the gameplay being changed like this on another system once again proves to me that what Layton is on the DS is a game that is tailor-made for it. Now let me just say this to end off the video. Whether you like the Layton series or not, I think it is a game worthy of coming up when discussing a perfect DS game. That'll be it for me. See you next time.